Okay, so tonight we're going to be covering real estate appraisal. Okay, uh, so what's going to happen is we're going to explain the steps in the appraisal process, identify the different types of value, four characteristics of value, the basic principles of value, the list and illustrate the steps in the appraisal process. We're going to actually go through the sales comparison approach, the cost approach, income approach, and reconciliation approach. Now, the first three are the actual approaches for valuation. The bottom one is basically going through and making certain that you did it right, if that makes sense. Okay. We're going to distinguish a comparative market analysis. What do we call that, Travis? A comparative market analysis. What's the word?
CMA.
A CMA. From an appraisal and pricing a property to be listed. And we're going to describe the requirements for becoming a licensed or a certified appraiser in Texas. So tonight, we're going to basically break down an opinion of value. All right. So real quick, Travis, I'm going to pick on you one more time. An opinion, that means that you and Elizabeth and Mr. Eugene, myself and Stefan and everybody else, we come to the same price, correct?
Absolutely.
That's what opinion means,
Yeah.
right? Okay. So,
My opinion's a fact.
It's a fact, right?
My opinion is a fact.
Yeah. So in that situation is now, Miss Elizabeth, do you agree with that? That he's always right? I mean, with this, it's fact.
Come on.
Well, as his wife.
Oh, it's the wife that's always right, Mr. Travis, not the other way around. But in this situation is that, yes, an appraisal is an opinion. So that means that if Travis does a evaluation, Mr. Eugene, you do an evaluation, Stefan does an evaluation, every one of you are going to come up with a different price. Now, hopefully it's close enough. You know, Mr. Travis may say the house is 280, Mr. Eugene, you may say 285, and Stefan may say 275. Okay? In that situation is you are within the same price range, but again, it comes into an opinion. All right? Now, ultimately, as you're going to see in regards to the value comes from different things, okay? You know, if you look at a particular item, say Mr. Eugene kind of going into your mother has passed and you've gone out to her house and seen what you wanted from the property, most of that stuff to her was what?
Valuable.
Extremely valuable, right?
Right.
But to you and your family and your brothers and sisters, what is it? Junk, okay? So in that situation is it shows you that it really, the idea of value, like we talked before, you know, Travis likes cars, okay? Well, if you don't like fast cars and you like slow cars, you like luxury cars, well, guess what? A fast car, if you love luxury, has no enticement to you. It's not worth anything. And vice versa. If I go show Travis an old grandma car, he's going to be like, why in the world would I want this thing? It ain't worth nothing. So in that situation is appraisal is basically an opinion of market value. And so to do this, we bring in an appraiser is what we end up doing. And an appraiser does the appraisal, okay? So an appraisal is an opinion of market value, and it's the most probable price that a property will bring. But like we said, it really varies. It really and truthfully varies on who's doing it. A buyer and seller must both be motivated. That means that when we're doing an opinion appraisal, the buyer actually has to want to go buy, and the seller's got to be willing to sell. Okay? Because if Travis, say for example, I'm picking on Travis today, but say Travis that you have something that was given to you by your father, okay, and it was something to you that is extremely valuable. And Mr. Eugene, say it was a watch, okay? Mr. Eugene, you walk to Travis and say, yeah, I'll give you exactly what it is, brand new, even though it's a used watch, I'll give you brand new price. Well, Travis probably say that watch, when it brand new, was $300. Well, Travis, do you care about $300 if your dad gave it to you?
No.
Heck no, it's priceless, okay? So in that same situation, Mr. Eugene, but in the same situation is it comes back to the situation is that both parties have to be motivated. Okay. There are times that there are certain people that they have certain things, just like Mr. Eugene with your father. Your father has passed. If you got his tool chest or his toolbox, okay, well, you got his toolbox, and Travis now comes to you and says, "I'll give you $100 for all of it," and you're probably going to say no. Okay, you're going to say no. That's my father's box. I'm not going to get rid of that. Okay. So again, both parties have to be motivated. It's just like when I go talk to clients. I know Stephen today, he got a call from a potential lead. They just called him off of one of his signs, and the lady was like, just find me something and just go knock on people's doors and just ask them, will you sell your property? Well, you can do that, and in Houston they do that a lot. But the thing is imagine if I walk up to Elizabeth's house, "Hi Elizabeth, I want to buy your house." She may say, "I don't want to sell my house. Get off my property."
I don't know my house.
Yeah, right. But if you say in that situation is that no, But again, they both have to be willing to be motivated, and they both also have to be informed. They got to know about it. Now, it also says in a reasonable time that is allowed on an open market. So you can't simply make an appraisal based upon a short period of time. It's got to be on an open market. And the payment must be in cash or an equivalent, okay? And no special financing or concessions. They are basically appraising the property as if this property is on the market and it's for sale. The seller wants to sell and the buyer wants to buy, okay? So in that situation, that's what we need to keep in our mind as we're going through this, that this is the process. Mr. Stephanie. Okay, now, so as you can see here, this kind of breaks down the entire process in regards to step one all the way to the bottom, okay? So step one, basically, the very first thing is you got to state the problem. Now, of course, the problem in this situation is that, okay, Mr. Eugene's selling his house. So we need to know, our problem is how much Mr. Eugene's your house worth. Okay, $500,000, okay. Well, we'll see, all right? So in that situation, we got to know our problem. So our problem is you appraised it. Yeah. So you're an appraiser all of a sudden. Yeah. Miss Leela is an appraiser, and she just said it's worth $1. So
mine's over hers.
No. Well, didn't you hear earlier? Women are right, men aren't. We just established that before we got in here. So, well, let's ask your wife here.
She's not here, so I go with them.
Oh, she just walked in. She drove your truck. So, yeah, she's here. So in this situation is that you got to state your problem. Now, is it always, Stephen, is it always going to be the state your problem? Is that always going to be somebody's trying to sell their house? No, what could it be, Travis? Could it be that their house burnt down? Could it be that there's an insurance claim? Could it be that there's other situations, maybe a church burnt down? Maybe there's many different things that can happen. But we need to know what the problem is. Okay, so in this particular situation, as we're using that hypothetical of Mr. Eugene, you're wanting to sell your house, because that's 90% of the time. Okay, now, for us to end up figuring out what your property's worth, we need to list our data that we need, and what sources do we need to look through. So we need to find out the different places, and then we need to gather and record that data. All right. So things in this situation could be general data, specific data, and also data for each approach. So one of the things that an appraiser does is an appraiser does not just look at a house and say, okay, here's the house. Now I found 3 properties in the same subdivision, and so they all sold for $200,000 or around $200,000, so it's $200,000. No, because here's the thing in that situation. What happens, Travis, if the 3 that sold were only 5 years old and Mr. Eugene's 10? Does that take effect? What if Mr. Eugene never maintains his yard? Does that take an effect? What happens if Mr. Eugene never takes care of the interior of his property? What if it's outdated stuff? And what if all the appliances are outdated? Does that take an effect? Yeah. So, Mr. Eugene, while these other places around you sold for 200, yours might sell for 120 to 150. Because of the fact is you're outdated. Okay? So it's kind of one of the things that I always told my parents all the time was, and I tell everybody this, Mr. Eugene, question, when your parents bought their house, was the house in pretty good condition when they bought it? Was there foundation issues?
To be honest with you, I don't know.
But
There's a lot of
most-
issues with it now.
But most likely then, it was probably in better
pretty good
condition,
shape, yeah.
right? than
I
now.
didn't have as many crack walls.
That's right. So the thing is as you can see is, and I always tell people this all the time, you can have an older house that can be taken care of and maintained very well, and that house is worth the money that a new house is in that neighborhood. Okay? So if Travis say in your house that you went in, you fixed it up, and you got it all nice, and you got all the updated appliances, and you got it all looking pretty, that thing can go for top dollar because Travis took care of it. But if you got Stefan, who just moved in the house and just let it go to crap, what happens? The value is going to be what? It's going to be lower. Okay? So when they do an appraisal, they don't just drive by like what we do in BPOs. Okay? They actually go inside. And they look at all that stuff. They look at cracking. They look at all of that kind of stuff. And then they subtract. So while the neighborhood may show $200,000, they walk in and see a lot of issues. Guess what happens? It drops the price. And it drops the price. And it drops the price. Okay? So in that particular situation is, you're going to have to end up, they're going to find out the data. They're going to look at like the national, the regional, city, and neighborhood. They're also going to look at the subject site, any improvements that's been done, and then they're going to look at it from 3 different approaches: the sale, the cost, and the income. All right. Now, the next thing that they're going to end up doing is they're going to, this is the key one, number 4, what's the highest and best usage? Now, what the heck does highest and best mean? Well, highest and best means this. So if Travis, say that Mr. Eugene, his house is right next to Kyle Field. I'm talking like smack dab right next to Kyle Field. Is that lot that he's on, is it good to be a house or should it be something else?
Probably something else.
What do you think it should be maybe?
Some sort of
What,
athletic center or something.
what about a parking garage? Whoa, a parking garage. Because in that situation is, Mr. Eugene, if you put, say you let Travis and Elizabeth move in, and you're charging them $2,000, because you remember, you gotta look at your rent price, so you charge them $2,000 a month. Well, do you think you could get $2,000 a month by renting out parking spots? Probably. How much do you think you could get, Travis?
Much more.
Maybe 20,000. Okay, so when they look at it, yeah, that house is coming down, right? And we're building a multi-level parking garage. But again, in that situation is they determine the highest and best usage. What is the exact highest and best? For example, you may end up, the house may end up being in a residential neighborhood, but commercial surrounds it, like in Houston. You go around, if commercial surrounds it, what's the best thing? What's the highest and best for that house now? It needs to be torn down, put a commercial building. Okay? So in those situations is you got to determine what the highest and best is. And that's why they do this approach here. That's why they do the sales, cost, and income approach. Because they're determining, Mr. Eugene, what's your best price, what you should do. Okay? And then the next one is you want to estimate the value by each of the 3 approaches, which we just talked about. And then you reconcile to indicate the values of the final opinion, and you report them. Okay? So in this situation, you're going to do all 3. And after you've ended up doing all 3, you look at it from the highest and best, you estimate it, you reconcile, and then you make a final determination. Okay? Now, does that mean, Mr. Eugene, if Stephan is the appraiser on your property and he says, yeah, Mr. Eugene, your property's better off on you renting it out than living there. Does that mean that you need to rent it out? No, it's your choice. You can live there. Okay? But again, Stephan has a duty to tell you what? He's going to tell you this is your best bet.
Yeah.
However, since you're doing what you're doing, then you want to do that. Okay? So, the key things that we determine when we're looking at value is we determine the characteristics of value utilizing this acronym of DUST. Okay? We got to find out, to determine value, we have to determine the demand, the utility, the scarcity, and the transferability. Okay? So, Mr. Eugene, 1940s, 50s, 60s. What do you think the demand for land was? 40s, 50s, 60s, even in the 70s.
Well, in the 40s, might have been a dust bowl, so they didn't really care.
Yeah. And most of the time back in the early times,
Cheap.
everybody had a lot of land.
Yep.
That's why a lot of people, family-wise, if you talk to your great-grandparents or you talk to even your grandparents, they'll tell you, we had a lot of land and we took care of acres and acres and acres and acres. Okay? But as we've continued, especially in this thing called the baby boom era, what happens with the baby boom? What was that, Mr. Eugene?
I guess y'all decided to buy a lot.
No, baby boomers are what? There's a lot of kids. Kids were born, tons of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Big and tall.
So in that situation is those baby boomers are now what? Those baby boomers are now our parents, right? Travis and Elizabeth and Stephen and me. Our baby boomers, our parents are baby boomers. So the baby boomers were huge, tons of them. Well, with all of y'all out there now, one of the largest population growths, what's happened, Mr. Eugene? Y'all want property. All these people want property. All these babies are now adults that want houses. Okay? So what's happened is the demand over the years have increased. People want the land. Okay? Now, Elizabeth, what do you think in regards to our day? Do we really want a lot of land?
I just want 4 acres.
You just want 4
I can do
acres?
so much on 4 acres.
Let's see. How about you, Stephanie? You want a lot of land?
Really? Yeah, 4 acres sounds good.
Okay. So do we really want hundreds and hundreds of acres?
Something too much work.
Too much work, right? Okay. Me personally, I'd be happy with just a small lot with my mom and dad will tell you, I just want concrete. I don't want no grass because I have to mow it. Just put concrete all around and I'm good. Okay.
Yeah.
But in that situation, what is it? Is the older, our families and grandparents, our parents and grandparents, they have lots and they have all those things. But as of us, millennials, what happens? We don't want all that stuff. We want simple. Okay, that's all we want. So again, you're able to, that's why you're seeing these neighborhoods where they're on top of each other, because people our age don't want to have to go out and mow the yard and weed eat and do flowers and all. We don't deal with that. We just want to move in and live there. Okay. So the next thing is the utility. Okay. How can that property, what's the benefits of that property? Okay. Also scarcity. How scarce is the property? What's happening in California?
They're all coming this way.
Well, why are they having to come here? What's the reason? Why are they coming here? Not just
Now
taxes.
that's funny.
What's that?
I think that was Miss Liz who said, "Are they all coming this way?"
Yes, that was the thing is the reason is, Miss Leela, we have had so many people calling us for showings because they're moving all over here. And the reason is because of this. The land out there is scarce. Everybody had moved out there, but now what happens when everybody moves there? What's the problem? It gets too packed. And the demand out there is through the roof. And traffic's awful. So again, these are some of the things that can end up increasing values. You can sell, I've had clients that have sold their house in California and moved here and bought 3.
Yep.
3. 3.
Seriously, 3.
How y'all like my 3 there? 3. So 3, okay? Also transferability, all right? We got to know how easy it is to transfer. If it's difficult to transfer, value's not there. But if it's easy to transfer, makes it easy. Market value against market price. Understand that market value is what, again, like we said, is a value versus the price is what someone will actually pay. I'm trying to see if we're actually going to go through that. No, we'll go through that in a little bit later. Okay, market price. Now, the key thing I want to kind of put into all of these is break it down. Market value, you got to kind of look at these different situations. Don't let the market throw you. I want to look at 3 terms. I want to look at cost, I want to look at price, and I want to look at value. Those are my 3 terms that I want to focus on. What's cost, Mr. Eugene, to you?
Nothing cost, bills cost me.
No?
No.
Cost is this. How much do you think it cost Stefan to build this table? If He's the manufacturer of this. How much do you think it cost Stefan to build this table?
You already had the stuff and then he just put it together?
No, he's getting the stuff to build it for you. So he's the manufacturer. How much stuff do you think this wood right here, this whatever particle board or whatever this stuff is here? $5 maybe. How much about this little metal part of
Now,
that?
you are referring before COVID, correct?
I'm not getting into the detail. I'm not trying to get to
Okay.
that. What about this metal part? What about this metal part? Maybe 30. Okay. So in that situation, so would y'all say, Elizabeth made a good point. Total, would you say this whole investment or cost wise, $35?
Yeah.
Okay, $35 it costs them. So cost is what? It's just the supplies. Okay. So in that situation, it costs you, Stefan, $35. Now, Stefan, question for you. Are you going to sell this table to Elizabeth for $35?
No,
Why not?
because I gotta make.
She's a sweet girl. You're going to be that greedy?
I gotta make a profit.
Golly, look at this. You got to you mean you got to pay your bills?
I gotta pay my employees.
Man. So in that situation, like you said, Mr. Eugene, you got to pay somebody to make them, because do you want to do this?
No.
No, because what's the problem? If he's doing it, who's running the factory or who's operating or getting more business? Nobody.
It's funny because he did it. He put
Yeah. So in that situation, he's got to pay his employees. Now, Mr. Eugene, you work for free, right? At your job, you just go there voluntarily?
Well, I think I do. She gets paid. I don't.
Oh, Miss Linda gets it. That's okay. But the key thing is, Mr. Eugene, or nobody wants to work for free. So, Stefan, do you got to pay Mr. Eugene to put these together?
I mean, technically, yeah.
Yeah. So you probably figure out with Mr. Eugene, I got to pay $10 per table. So now, how much is the cost, quote unquote?
45.
$45.
okay. Yesterday.
So in that situation is, Mr. Grossman, so this is $45, right? All right, so now you're going to sell it to Elizabeth for $45, right? Because you don't need no money, right?
No.
No?
Still gotta go up.
Man, Elizabeth, he's mean up here. So what are you going to sell it to Miss Elizabeth for?
$2,000.
God, dog! You'll go look somewhere else.
He wants
That markup is
I'd
extreme
probably
markup
like-
right there.
Realistically, I'd probably sell it to her for like $75.
Your hourly rate is real high.
Yeah.
$75?
That's
Sounds good to me.
That's
So
doable.
that's doable.
Sold.
Now, in reality, I paid $160 for each one.
160.
$160 for each
And
one.
I'm gonna charge you 260.
But hold on. But if you think about, we said say about $50, and they charged me 160. They're making how much of a profit? 110. Now, here's some things you got to account for. Mr. Grossman, do you have to pay utilities? Do you have to pay light bills?
Yeah.
Do you have to pay for E&O insurance, health insurance, and all these other things that go with it?
There's a lot of it.
And that goes into Mr. Eugene, right?
Yeah.
So probably each one of these tables costs how much, maybe? Maybe $100.
Yeah.
Maybe $100.
Could be.
So in that situation, you're still profiting $60. But again, the key thing here is the cost, say it was $100. Okay, that's the cost. But what's the price? What's the price of it?
So I see buy it.
The price is what the person's willing to pay for it. Now, Mr. Eugene, question. Or let's go with Miss Elizabeth. Miss Elizabeth. So it cost him $100. He values it, which means he puts it in the stores for $160. And if you notice, if you ever worked in any type of stores or retail, what do they always do? They mark it way up high, but then how do they get you to buy it?
It's on sale.
Sale, and they knock it down.
It was $2,000. Now it's only $160.
That's right? And they do that crazy
That's a
sale.
deal.
Now it's only $199.99.
Yeah. So in that situation, do you see the difference? Cost is what it actually cost you to build it or to make it. The value is what they price it at, but don't use the word price to throw you. It's what they're, I always tell people, think of the value as the MSRP. The MSRP of a vehicle. Now, Mr. Eugene, do you ever pay the MSRP of a vehicle?
No,
Ever? No, you never pay the MSRP because what did Travis and Elizabeth just say? It's always on what? It's on sale.
We got a deal for it.
Yeah. So the price is actually what you pay for it. Okay. So you've got to know those differences between cost, price, and value so that you see cost is what it actually, like if Travis goes and buys a lot of land and you buy that lot for at a tax sale for say $5,000, your cost $5,000. He goes list it on the MLS for $25,000 and it sells for 20. Well, what is it? The listing price is the value he's giving it to, but the price is what? The amount that it actually was paid for. Do you see how this works? Okay. Now, another term in this situation is what we call highest and best. Now, Mr. Eugene, what was highest and best we just talked about? Give Miss Linda an example.
Well, it's like, say you had your house right down there by him out the football field, and we had a adjuster come out there, appraisal come out there and he checked it out. He said, the best thing for you to do is tear this house down and put a parking garage there. You make a lot more money on it than you would make a thing written it out for $2,000 a month.
Do you see how that works? So highest and best is where it basically, it's the most probable use to which a property is suited. Okay, so they may tell you that a house may be best here. They may tell you an office building may be better here. They may say an industrial park may be good here. They may say a parking garage. But highest and best is the best way and the most usage you're going to get out. Now, this comes back to where Stephen Elizabeth was telling you he was going to charge you $2,000 for this $100 table here. It's called the principle of substitution, Mr. Grossman. So Miss Linda goes out and builds a guest very similar to Mr. Grossman's $2,000 guest. And it's almost identical, but not perfectly. It's very close to it. And she's selling hers for $120. Which one are you going to go for? Because of what? Because his price is what? Crazy. But who's more realistic? Miss Linda. So it's the principle of substitution. It's where basically, if there are two items that are very similar, you're oftentimes a person's going to do what? They're going to go with the cheaper one, not the more expensive one. So that's why if you put two houses that have the exact same floor plan in the same neighborhood, one is 275 and one's 250, which one are you going to go for? The 250. Okay? So it's the maximum value, the cost of purchasing an equally desirable or valuable substitute property. Supply and demand, very basic in economics. It's basically that the value of property will change as supply and demand increases or decreases. What's going on, Miss Linda? You said earlier, what about lumber? The supply, the demand for lumber is extremely low, right?
No, it's
No.
some places it's triple
Why is there demand for lumber?
because of buildings.
Because people are building. And because of COVID, what's happened?
Price
There was
hike.
a delay in building because there's been shut down, some places months. And if they've been shut down, what happens? There's no supply. There's limited supply. Demand does what? Goes up. That's why
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
If someone had contracted a home, I was just reading about how they were canceling their contracts just for that very same reason,
Yes, ma'am.
because there's just no lumber. Are you able to cancel your contract?
As long as you're within your option period, you are.
Okay.
If you're outside of your option period, it's up to the builder to allow it. And I can tell you, I actually had a phone call with the builder today, and she was telling me that they had pre-COVID, they were quoting about $8 to $10 for lumber, okay, for each piece. They had to go up 35% on their stuff. And so now she said, Justin, just one hardy plank, just one board of hardy plank, used to you could go out of the door for $8.60. It's now $38.42.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
You're talking about the sheet?
The sheet, that one sheet.
The 4x4.
You got it's like a
Plywood.
plywood, size of a plywood. That one sheet's going out for almost $40 basically. So who has to pay that? Well, it's going to be passed on to the buyer, the consumer. So, and I can justify that because the fact is, when I went down to Lowe's, when all this was kind of going on, I went in one morning and it was $8. Went back that afternoon, it was 12. So, in that situation is supply and demand, everything is going up. Okay. Same thing everybody's asking. Somebody posted and said, why is gas prices going up? Well, same point. We've been where? We had all been locked in our houses for months, if not some people a full year, been locked in the houses, they've not been traveling. So the demand was what? Low. So supply, they didn't want to oversupply it, so they just started cutting back. Well, now what's everybody starting to do? States are reopening. As they reopen, more people are doing what? Traveling.
Yep.
And as they're traveling, the demand is high, so prices are through the roof. Okay. Another thing is you've got the economy being slow because like we just talked about, economy's slow. Guess what? Government has to put money into the economy to get people spending. Well, for giving money to the people, what does the government got to do to get that money back? They got to tax it and prices go up. Okay. So what's happening is while people think, well, hey, I got free money, really it's not free money. You're going to pay it back, sometimes even more. Okay. So if they give you, say, $1,400, maybe within 6 months, you might have paid in taxes and all, probably $2,000. Okay. So you got to be very careful when you're going through this. And that's why it's sad, because the people that really and truthfully get hurt by this is not the intelligent people, the knowledgeable people. It's the average consumer that doesn't understand how the process works. Okay. And those are the ones that unfortunately get taken advantage of, and it's sad to say. But again, another thing is going to our next term in regards to conformity. Okay. Conformity is that it's the maximum value when land use conforms to the existing neighborhood standards. If Miss Linda, in your neighborhood, say Stephen moves in, Mr. Stephen moves next door, the house right next to you, okay, and he tears that house down, and he moves a trailer house in right there. Is his property conforming to the neighborhood?
No.
Why is it not conforming?
Because the houses are slab and they're brick and etc., and that's a trailer house.
And it's
Different types of material.
It's a trailer house.
It's different. It's not pure.
Now, what just happened, because he tore down his deal, he tore that 2-story house down, he put a trailer house, what did he do to your value?
He devalued it.
He devalued your property. Okay? So in that situation is, understand that if a property does not conform, I've actually been, and Travis, you probably been around too, doing some CMAs and all, but I've been to a neighborhood where I drove down and it's big mansion, trailer house, trailer house, trailer house, trailer house, trailer house. And it's like, what in the world? Well, what just happened to the value, Mr. Eugene, of that big mansion? Down the hole. Because why? Everywhere around it is a trailer house.
I've done multiple showings at places like that where pictures look awesome. Love the location of it as far as like when you look on Google Maps, like it looks right between here and here, exactly what I need. And then we drive out to it, and like we get to the gate, and they're like, "Look, I don't want to look here because I don't like the neighborhood it's in or whatever."
Yep. And that's the thing is, because of the fact is, what just happened? It's not conforming, and since it's not conforming, people don't want it. And so what happens? Well, the value just goes down. Okay. Externalities. I always love to throw these different things in here. Same as Linda, even some catch me too. Influences outside the property have a positive and negative effect on it. That basically, it's talking about external factors. Okay. So just like Travis said, if there's a property and there's a bunch of trailer houses around, that's going to have a factor, a negative factor. Now, Mr. Eugene, what happens if you move into a neighborhood and Mr. Grossman moves in next door to you and he starts a pig farm? That's going to increase your value, right? Why?
Don't put pigs out there. Smell.
Do you see any problem with it?
No.
He sees no problem with it.
Well, I got to put a big wall up all the way around him and close it in so we don't know he's there.
It's just got a few pigs.
Yeah, a few. One is too
You
many.
get free manure.
One is too many.
Hey,
All
look
that
at this,
noise and
Stephanie.
everything.
Pigs are violent.
Free bacon.
Yeah, I will be when I get done with it.
But again, the key thing is that, yeah, you don't want to live next to a pig farm. Watch this. What happens in this situation? What happens if, Mr. Eugene, you move into a neighborhood with your family and your children, and Garrett moves in next door and he's a sex offender?
Time for us to move out.
Why are you moving?
Everybody don't say something. Move out.
Do you see what happens? These are external factors that doesn't have to deal with the house. What is it? It's other things. What if you move Mr. Eugene you move next door to Mr. Keith, okay? But you now moved into an area that's known for tornadoes.
Time to move out.
Why are you moving?
I don't really want to hit by one of them tornadoes.
Do you see how these things can happen? There are many external factors that can have a huge play in the properties. That's why I tell people all the time is, housing can be great, but you got to move with it. If you go in and you stay in one spot for your entire life, what's going to happen? That house when you moved in may be in great position, but over time, what happens? It devalues. It's like a car. Now the land may go up, but the house itself does what? Over time, it devalues.
Unless you keep it up.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So basically, I think what you're saying is like most environments would change every so often, maybe every 7 or 10 years. And if it changes negatively, it would cause that person to want to move.
That's correct. That is
So
correct.
how do you is there no way around that, or is that just how it is?
It really, to be honest with you, Miss Leland, I can tell you this, I've just seen this over the years. I wish I would have saw this when I was younger, but as I've been in real estate for well over a decade now, I have seen neighborhoods that what happens is people like new stuff. We all like new things. And the people that can afford new things continue to get new things. And the people that can't, if they can't afford the newest and best, they're buying those people's used items, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens is you oftentimes, Miss Leela, you may be in a neighborhood that when you first moved in, it was a wonderful neighborhood and you loved it, okay? But then over 10 years, those people that were your neighbors have moved off. And what's happened is those prices, because the properties weren't probably taken care of, those prices have dropped from what it originally was, or people were able to buy them as a group, maybe 2 families moved in, and over time you see the neighborhood slowly decline. Now that happens mainly when you don't have an HOA, and this is where an HOA can be beneficial. If the HOA is properly ran, guess what happens? It forces that person. So say that Mr. Eugene, you live in the neighborhood with Miss Leela. Miss Leela takes care of her property and makes it look perfect. But you move in, Mr. Eugene, and you just kind of, every time something breaks, you just throw some caulking on it or duct tape or something.
Well, if it's bad, I still Miss Leela's.
Oh, you throw it into Miss Leela's
I
yard.
don't think so.
Now wait a minute.
Miss Leland, that won't happen.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
No, I said Linda told me to do it.
No,
Oh, yeah,
Linda
yeah.
didn't say nothing.
But what happens is that because the HOA comes in and they're going to force you, Mr. Eugene, to keep your house to the at least minimum standard that's agreed upon in your paperwork, which means that the neighborhood, even if somebody comes in there and moves in and is a very cheap, does not fix things, over time, Mr. Eugene, if you constantly, Travis is the HOA president, and he's constantly sending fine, what are you going to eventually do?
You're gonna move?
You're going to move.
Probably stay there and enjoy it.
No, you're going to move. You're going to get out. And so when you move, what happens is guess what? Miss Leela now has a new neighbor that comes in that may actually fix it up, and now her prices stay. That's why in HOAs, prices in those areas, what happens to them? The prices stay together, okay? They fluctuate together, but they all kind of stay the same, all right? While if you go into a neighborhood, say, Mr. Eugene, like in yours, that does not have an HOA, you could technically, if it wasn't under city, say you weren't in the city, say you were a little on the outskirts, you could have Stephen move next door, tear down the house, put a trailer house, and have a pig farm. Now, what did he just end up doing to your house? He killed your value. So all that money you worked for over the years to put into this investment, what just happened? It just went goodbye. Does that make sense, though, Miss Leland?
Yes, thank you.
You're good. So in these situations, is people don't understand, that's why there is, Miss Linda here, she'll tell you, I'll say, Miss Linda, you want to move into an HOA? And her response is, heck no.
Nope.
My father's the same way. Heck no. Okay. But the thing is it's not until something like that happens that Mr. Stephan goes in and moves next door to you, and he may not even put a trailer house. He may just move next door to you, Mr. Eugene. He goes in, he moves next door, and guess what? He puts pigs in his backyard, or he puts chickens in his backyard. Well, what ends up happening in that situation? What's the problem? If you get breakfast in the morning. No, what's the problem with that? Well, in that situation is, and here's my thing. I kind of saw Elizabeth turn there. I'll be honest why I bring up chickens, because when I used to rent, there was a neighbor next to me that had chickens. It's fine if the chickens are cooped, if you see what I'm saying, or they're fenced in where they can't get out. You see what I'm saying? Where they can't get. But what happened with my situation was the chickens were constantly outside, and I'm not joking, y'all. This gives you a little image.
Rooster.
There was a rooster and 4 chickens. They would always come across into my part of the yard, start basically waking me up around 4 in the morning, the rooster especially, and then end up, they would go around and they would just kind of pick all my garbage. So they get into my garbage and they would kind of like get in and make a huge mess throughout my whole thing. And then, of course, there was this one the guy that owned it was an Asian guy, and he'd come out there with the broom and he'd be shoo, shoo, and just kind of pushing them around. But the thing is that can actually cause an external issue, because what could end up happening in that situation is now I got to get out there and pick up all my garbage. I got to go clean up all my stuff. So in those situations they can have positive or negative. It could be. Same thing in this situation. Say that you live, I'll give you an example because I was in Huntsville. When I was in Huntsville, it seemed like every single time you ended up, every corner you go to, there's a freaking cop. Okay? Well, Miss Linda, to you, is that a good thing?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's safety, right? Mm-hmm. But what if you're a college kid wanting to have fun? You don't want to have that. It's negative. Okay? You don't want to be in that area. Okay? So again, you got to kind of look at these pros and cons. Anticipation. Anticipation is basically a future benefit or detriment that affected. And that's the same thing where Mr. Grossman moves in, and he moves in, Mr. Eugene, to your neighborhood, and he has a pig farm. Well, guess what? You just got you a huge drop in your price. Okay? He might have just dropped your price $100,000. Okay? Again, these are some of those situations in that particular one. There's also the decreasing and increasing returns. Again, this is kind of that situation when we're coming into this. When we go into this situation, it goes into this particular area. What I try to tell people is that when you're going in through these particular areas, there can be, Mr. Eugene, you might want to put, for example, you may want to turn your house into a 2-story home. So your house right now is a 1-story home, and you want to turn it into a 2-story home. Well, guess what, Mr. Eugene? Just because you turn it into a 2-story home, it does not mean that you're going to actually increase the value. Okay? You're going to say, well, how is that? Well, here's the thing. We have to look at the neighborhood in this particular situation. We have to look at our neighborhood. Well, if everything around me is 1 story, guess what the value is going to be based upon? It's 1 story. You put a 2-story in there, you're basically over improving your property, and you're not actually increasing your return. You're actually decreasing because you're not going to be able to get that money back. That's why when we sit down and we talk to people, we sit down and we actually will say, Mr. Keith, I know that you want to put a swimming pool in the backyard. Well, when I pulled some comps, I noticed that nobody in your neighborhood has a pool at all. There's zero pools. So, Mr. Keith, if you put a pool in your backyard, you might not get your return on your investment that you're looking for. You may spend $40,000 or $50,000 to build the pool, but guess what, Mr. Keith? Now in this particular situation, you're spending $40,000 or $50,000 to maybe make $5,000 or $10,000. In that situation, what's the point? Okay. Plottage and assemblage. This is where you basically come in and you're combining the lots. So you may say, Mr. Eugene, I'm going to buy my neighbor's lot, and I'm going to tear that house down, I'm going to join them, and I'm going to build on to my property. You can do that. You're combining your lots and you're putting them together. You're assembling them together. There is the principle of contribution. And this is the value of any component is going to be measured by the amount that it contributes or the amount its absent detracts. Okay? So in this situation there can be one particular thing that you can put in, but you want to make certain that whatever you're contributing, that component is actually going to give you a return on your investment. Competition, of course, we understand the more competition there is, the prices do what? You keep them down. You keep them down. Because the more competition that's out there, it basically ends up, the more people that are competing for it, you get some principles of substitution. The principle of substitution allows more property to be out there, which makes prices kind of stay where it's at a happy medium. Change, of course, we understand that nothing remains constant. Nothing remains constant. Things change. It's out of our control. So in those particular situations you have to always understand that we have to take into consideration change. What's coming? What's going to move? Now, again, there are three approaches to value. There is the sales approach, there is the cost approach, and then there is your income approach. Okay? Now, again, the sales approach is what? Well, it's the most reliable approach for the owner-occupied residential real estate. And this one is going to be the one that you use in most situations. So, Mr. Travis, do you have a moment while I can step out? Could you come up and explain to them how a CMA is done and what you do in a CMA real quick for me? Just kind of tell them about the 3 and the 3.
Yeah, no. Yeah, so basically for a CMA, all it's going to entail is you'll get a client who will basically ask that you find for a certain property you're trying to compare. So if you're looking at a house that's, a 3-bed, 2-bath, around 1,200 square foot, whatever, with, a hot tub or a pool or whatever, you're basically just going to go on the MLS or any other kind of on HAR or Zillow or wherever you can find, and basically try to find 3 current listings and 3 listings that have been sold or are under contract currently within the past 6 months. They try to go 3 to 6 months. Usually you try to go as soon as close back as you can. If you can find something that's sold a week ago that's best 6 months, after that you're kind of pushing it, they might not accept it, or it's kind of, you don't know how the market's fluctuated at that point, so the prices could be totally different. Basically all you're going to do is go online. What we do on our search software is basically just look up, let's say it's 3-bed, 2-bath. I type in 3-bed, 2-bath, maybe 3+ and 2+. You might get something that's 4.3 or 4.2 that's close enough in square footage that you can kind of find it, and just find the 3 best you can find that are active and comparatively that are sold also, and then using that you can kind of guesstimate what you think the property is worth. So if the 3 actives you are, those average out to 260, the 3 solds average out to like 250ish or whatever, you can basically say at that point that you think the house or the property should be sold for around 250 to 260, around there. And so it just kind of gives them an idea of what you think the properties are at that point.
Very good. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. All right. So in that situation, like he said, sales approach is you're comparing like properties. Now, real quick, I forgot to ask this. Yeah. Travis, does this mean when you do a CMA, these are always easy, right? They're never difficult. No.
No.
Some are. Some are. But let me ask, so if Mr. Keith has a property in Beedize, Texas, okay, is there going to be a lot of comps out there?
Probably not.
Why not?
Especially depending on what he has.
Well, he has a trailer house.
There might be a lot of those.
That's right.
So maybe that'll be easy.
He's got a, now all of a sudden he's got a mansion.
That's not going to be hard.
Why is that going to be hard?
There's probably not a lot of those out there. So
Probably
tell me-
only one.
Probably only the only one.
I've
Right?
gotten CNAs for, like I said, 3-bed, 2-bath, just, 1,800 square foot houses that are pretty easy because, in a neighborhood, you can find 10 in the neighborhood that are on the market right now that are the exact same house.
Correct.
I've also found some where I drive out to Iola or kind of northwest of Caldwell and I find a property. I go there to look at it and it's a 6-bed, 4-bath, 3,200 square foot mansion with a pool and a hot tub and a this and a that and everything else. And I'm like, well, this is going to be the only one like it probably in this center part of Texas. So it makes it a little bit more difficult to find comparatives in that sense.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that you'll see as a real estate agent is when you're doing the sales approach, if it's in the city and they're all pretty similar, it's a simple little thing that boom, you can knock out. But if, Mr. Keith has that mansion out in Beedize, Texas, that's going to be kind of difficult.
Yeah.
Okay. Or what if Miss Linda builds an igloo in College Station, Texas?
That's going to be tough to
Why is that going to be tough?
Probably not a lot of those.
So in
I
that
imagine Miss Linda's the only crazy lady who would make an igloo in the middle of College Station.
She may only have a home for a few days.
Yeah. So in that situation is, you got to look at the situation. If it's a unique property, guess what? You've got to run different numbers and you got to kind of figure it out. And that's why we have 2 other approaches. That's why we have the cost approach and we have the income approach.
I also did one. I remember I did one for a trailer house that was a maybe 800 to 1,000 square foot, like 1-bed, 1-bath trailer house that had an in-ground pool and a hot tub. And so that was very much like, well, I can't find anything else that has a pool, but also everything that does have a pool is a nice house, not just falling apart. I have no idea I don't even know what would be close to this.
Yep.
So you find really just weird, unique stuff like that too sometimes.
And see, and that's the key thing that I always tell people is understanding these situations is that you are going to end up, you're not always going to have that perfect approach. Mr. Grossman and Mr. Travis can definitely tell you that it never is easy. It never is easy. You may take one that comes through across to you and you think, oh, this is going to be a quick one. And you get out there and you see that it's 3,200 square feet, like you said, with 6 bedrooms.
Yeah.
Okay. Another question I was going to ask, kind of like with Mr. Eugene, we said that Mr. Eugene he turned his 1-bedroom into his 1-story home into a 2-story home. Can you compare a 1-story to a 2-story? Can you compare a trailer house to a brick and mortar? No. So in these situations, it has to be like kind.
But there is some clients think that you can.
Well, of course, there are some clients that will think that, but in reality, what happens is you got to compare them to the same. Okay, very key. The cost approach, of course, like we talked about, it's the most reliable approach for special use properties. So, Mr. Eugene, if we're trying to, the church you go to, it burns to the ground, and the church was built in 1800. Are you going to be able to compare that through a sales approach where you find like kind? No, because what's the problem?
Don't make that stuff anymore.
They don't make it like that no more. The material and everything is not the same. So if it burns to the ground and we're trying to value it, we can't compare it to like kinds. What do we have to do? We have to go and look at the cost. How much is it going to cost us to rebuild and put it back to its similar price? Okay, you're not ever going to get perfectly the same, but in the situation is you're going to try to get as close as you can. Again, the next one is the income approach, and this is for people that are renters or investors. From you, Mr. Eugene, if you're renting your property to, say, Miss Elizabeth and Mr. Travis, in that situation is you may want to know what's the most reliable approach? You know, if I'm getting $1,200 a month from them to live in my 4-bedroom house, what is my approximate value of this house? And again, there are some formulas and all that we'll share with you. But again, you need to kind of know what's your value based upon the rents earned. There's also the sales approach goes in further and it compares that property, like we said, with the recently sold similar properties. They, of course, are going to adjust the sales prices of the comparable properties for the date of the sale, the location, physical features, and again, the terms and conditions of that sale. They will further adjust the sales prices of the comparables while adding to the comparable a feature that's present in the subject but not in the comparable. So, for example, like we said earlier, Travis goes out, he finds a house that's very similar. Say that we're going back to Keith's property. Keith has a property in Beedice, Texas. It's a mansion. It's 4,000 square feet. It's got a pool, a jacuzzi. It's got a lot of things, a lot of amenities, okay? The nearest one that Travis can find is Mr. Grossman's house that's in the next town over, okay? Well, now, Mr. Travis, if Mr. Grossman's property is in the next town over, and that town is very populated, and it's like, say it's College Station, is the value of Stefan's truly going to be equal to Keith's property?
No.
Why not?
This is probably much more desirable because it's in a real town.
The location.
Yeah.
You actually have amenities. So when you're doing your price, if Stefan's is $1 million, are you going to say Keith's worth $1 million?
Nope.
No. That's only, though, understand, that's only if they both have the same size of land. Now, here's something else. What if now, Travis, let's cut back. So Stefan has a half-acre lot in College Station, and Keith has 50 acres in Beedice. Now, could it possibly be that Keith's property may be worth more than Stefan's?
Possibly.
Why is that?
You got a lot of land.
The land. So that's the thing when we go through these and we're making adjustments, we got to look at all these different little elements. What exactly, well, yeah, it's Stefan's in town, but he only has half an acre. Yeah, he's got amenities around him. Okay, you got amenities around you. But what about this 50 acres that now Keith has with his property? Maybe there's certain tax incentives with Keith's property. Okay, so you got to look at all these different situations. Again, you add to the comp a feature that's present in the subject but not the comparable, and you subtract from the comparable a feature that's present in the comparable but not in the subject. Again, you analyze the adjusted prices of the comparables, and you're going to arrive at the indicated value by the sales comparison approach. Now, let's jump to cost approach. Now, cost approach is the estimated land value. So they're going to start off very first is because most likely that church, Mr. Eugene, that you go to, it's burnt to the ground. So if a church is burnt to the ground and there's just burnt lumber, okay, does that burnt lumber have any value to anybody? No. So in that situation, what does have value still? The land. So we got to start where? The land. Okay. So we find out that the land is in a prime location, and so that land is worth $100,000. Okay. Now we need to go in and we need to add the cost of the improvements. Now there's two deals here. There's what's called reproduction costs and replacement. Reproduction is we want the exact duplicate. We want to rebuild that church exactly like it was. Replacement costs is we are going to eliminate features that are no longer, they're obsolete, okay? So in these situations is you're going to have two different types of costs. We're then, after we figure out what the price would be, so to rebuild this church is going to cost $500,000, okay? Now the land itself is $100,000, so we're at $600,000. Now, Travis, my question is, Are we building a brand new church? Was that when the church burnt down? Was it brand new? No, it was built when? 1800s. So you're not getting a brand new church, Mr. Eugene. It burnt down. It was already old anyway. So what do we have to do? We have to estimate depreciation. So we got to calculate how much depreciation has occurred over the years. And that's why you're going to have what's called curable and incurable. Okay? So they're going to break down the physical breakdown, which is the loss due to the wear and tear. So over from 1800, Mr. Eugene, to 2021, the question for you, Mr. Eugene, is that a lot of years of wear and tear? 1800 to 2021.
A whole lot.
A whole lot. So in that situation is what happens. There's going to be a lot of depreciation taken off just from that.
Yep.
Okay. Then we also got to look at the functionality, the loss of the business utility. Okay. And then we have to look at the external, which is the factors outside of the subject property. So we have to look at all of these elements and come up with a price to depreciate off this brand new built building. Okay. They will then deduct that accrued depreciation from the estimated construction cost. So we said the land's 100, the building brand new is 500,000, but we noticed that there's over 200, maybe close to 250 years of wear and tear in this property. So in this situation is we're going to drop it by $200,000 or $250,000. So for you in a cost approach, the land's 100, we're taking off 250 out of 500. So we are going to come up with an approximate cost or value of $350,000 that they are going to value that property as. Okay. Now again, understand when dealing with cost approach, be very careful because insurance is also taken into play into this. So there's many different ways on how cost approach goes. You may, Mr. Eugene, hire Stephen to come out and give you a value of $350,000, but the insurance company may say, well, yeah, it was only worth $200 to us. Okay, so just because an appraiser may give you a market value of $350,000, the insurance company can give you a completely different number. Okay. Now, Mr. Eugene, this comes to the income approach. Income approach, the steps for what we call direct capitalization method, is that you estimate the potential annual gross income based upon the market rents. Okay. You then deduct the allowance for vacancy, which is what we call the effective gross income, and we're going to deduct the annual operating expenses, including management fees, but we do not take into effect or into account the principal and interest on your loan payments. And that's often referred to as your net operating income. You then estimate what's called the cap rate, and that's going to be your rate of return that the investor wants to seek, and that always varies, okay? And then you divide the net operating income by the cap rate, and then you'll arrive at your indicated value by the income approach. And don't freak out there. I'm going to put some supplemental videos up for y'all to watch and review. But again, this one is one of those that if you're going to purchase a property for rent, you do not want a sales comparison approach. You want to have an income approach, okay? So in that situation is, we want to make certain to have that breakdown there. Now, the gross rent multiplier, the GRM, is we want to simplify the income analysis for residential properties, but not the purchase for that income potential. So what breaks down in the GRM is you're going to take the GRM, the gross rent multiplier, multiply it by the gross monthly rent, and that will give you your sales price. Now on the test, they will give you the GRM most of the time. You just take it, enter in whatever they tell you is the monthly rent, and you come up with your sales price. Okay. There's also the gross income multiplier, and that's simplified income analysis for the commercial and industrial. So that's very key here. This one back here deals with residential. That's why there's an R. I always tell people, remember the GRM, residential. The GIM, think of industrial or commercial. Okay, that's where the I comes in. Same concept, you take in the gross income multiplier by the annual gross income, come up with your sales price. Now what's reconciliation? So we talked about the three methods in regards to appraising properties, but what about the reconciliation? What exactly is reconciliation? Well, it's the same thing as if you're reconciling your books. Okay, you're in accounting, you kind of know what I'm saying. It's where you take all three indications of the value that you came up with. You're not going to average those three values. You're not going to average them, but you're going to select the most reasonable and supportive value based upon the type of property. So you're going to come up with three different values, but you're going to then step back and look at highest and best. If it's in a neighborhood, you may compare what? The income versus the sales price to determine what? The price of the property. You may, if you're valuing a hospital or a church or a unique property, where you're going to put a lot of weight on. You're going to put a lot of weight on the cost approach. Okay? But again, it's where you come in and you look at these differences. So, real quick, I'm going to have Mr. Grossman step up here, and I'm going to have him explain to y'all what a CMA is. Okay, Mr. Stahl explained a BPO.
I explained the CMA.
Oh, you explained the CMA?
Yes.
Okay, so he explained the CMA. Then Mr. Grossman come up here and explain what is a BPO. Come on up here.
So a BPO is a lot like a CMA, and it's called broker price opinion. It's the same thing. You take three properties that are similar, that were sold, and three that were currently listed, and compare them to come up with the price of the property.
What's the point of a BPO? Why do you do BPOs?
To determine roughly what the price would be if you were to buy or sell.
Who orders them?
Foreclosure companies
Or banks?
or banks, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Mr. Travis, real quick, why do they want a BPO? Why would Elizabeth, if she's a bank, why would she want you to go out there and do a BPO?
So they know the house is actually worth for the.
They want to make certain that that house is what it's actually worth. Okay? So, Mr. Travis, you ended up for a while there after that winter storm, you started doing a lot of what's called property inspections. Why would a bank want to do a property inspection?
If anything's wrong with the property after a big disaster.
They want to make certain that, say, for example, Miss Linda, your house that you're financed was not damaged. And if it was, we need to get that addressed quickly. Now, Mr. Stephan, does if Miss Leela has a loan on her house, when you get a BPO, does Miss Leela, does she know that you're coming out to do the BPO? Does she have any idea?
No, she doesn't.
Why doesn't she have any idea?
She probably knows she's about to be foreclosed on, but she doesn't know that someone's coming out to price it.
Now, is a BPO always, though, a foreclosure?
No.
No, it could be like what Mr. Stahl just said, and they could just be wanting to do an inspection. Or they may want to find out how's the value's going. Is Mr. Eugene, if we gave Mr. Eugene $200,000, is his house really staying at $200,000, or did the price drop?
Yeah. Can people order BPOs in their own house?
They can if they want to. Yeah.
That happened once before too, where I get a
The homeowner.
person who ordered it is the homeowner.
Yep. So very good there. I appreciate that. So again, you're going to prepare a comparative market analysis, which is, in our layman's terms, we always use CMA. Okay. And Miss Linda, CMAs, is this real quick? Is this important for, say, Mr. Grossman's going out to sell Miss Leela's property? Is it important for Mr. Grossman to do a CMA before he goes out to the property?
Just to get an idea of what's around there.
But why, he don't need that, does he?
Yes, because the client is going to probably ask Stephen, or Mr. Grossman, how much, Mr. Grossman, how much the property or the houses are going around that area.
Yeah. Now, Mr. Travis, I want to ask you a question real quick, sir, because I like to kind of play this out. It just happens in real life.
Yeah.
So you go out to Miss Elizabeth's house. You don't know her from Adam, never met her before. Go out to Miss Elizabeth's house, and you've done your CMA, got it all taken care of, did everything you're supposed to. Miss Linda approved and said, go for it, okay? And you go out to Miss Elizabeth's property, and she sits down, and you say, well, Miss Elizabeth, your house is worth $250,000, and this is how I've done my CMA, and that's what your property's worth, okay? And Miss Elizabeth says, no, my house is worth $850,000. What do you do there, Mr. Travis?
Sounds good to me. I give you my opinion, but
Sure. In that situation, what does it happen? It comes
you wanna
to
be dumb.
your client makes that choice, not you. So you may end up, you might not come may not come to an agreement. Okay? And we've had that before, and I've had that many times myself over the years. That a client may end up in that particular situation. They may end up, oh, we're good. We're good. You don't have to worry about it. Because we're almost done.
Okay.
So in that situation it makes things way much easier in regards to just, let me reset. If you go out there, Travis, and you start telling Miss Elizabeth that she's wrong, Elizabeth, how's that going to go? How's that going to go for him?
Not very well.
Mr. Eugene, why are you doing this? Miss Linda, if Mr. Eugene tells you you're wrong, you don't know what you're talking about, how's that going to go for him?
I would probably, be honest with you.
Yeah.
I would probably tell him to get his stuff and get out and don't come back.
Oh, gosh.
And don't let the door hit
Now, would
you.
clients do that stuff?
Oh, yeah.
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 You cannot in some situations, and it's not just girls, I'm picking on the girls, but it could be guys. I've had guys that have done that.
Yeah.
But there are some people that in their mind, their house is worth what? A ton of money. Okay? But again, that comes back to, like we said earlier, is Mr. Eugene, if you have a tool set from your dad, it's worth a lot to you. But is it worth a lot to Travis?
No, it's junk.
It's junk to Travis, but to you, it's worth a lot.
That's right.
The same concept applies to people. If they've been in their property for 30, 40, 50 years, they think that their property is worth millions.
Mine is a-
But in reality, the numbers don't support it. It doesn't support it. No.
It would be nice.
I have another question.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry. When does the BPO come in?
All right, Mr. Grossman, come up here. She asked you a question.
You use a broker price opinion. Like we have companies that we signed up with, and they'll send us broker price opinions. You can make some money doing it on the side.
But when do they come into play, she's asking? When are they ordered?
When are they ordered?
When does a bank order?
Yeah, when they're getting foreclosed, right?
Could it be any time, Travis?
Yeah.
Yeah, it could be at any point. So it could be in multiple areas. Okay. So what can happen, like you said, most of the time, 90% Miss Leela is, like Mr. Grossman's saying, 90% of the time is going to end up being if they're going into foreclosure. But sometimes a bank may be just reviewing their books, and they may need to see what their valuations are of their assets. And they may have a broker go out or an agent go out and value the property because they're wanting to see how much their assets are worth. So Miss Elizabeth is a bank and she wants to maybe go get some money or maybe sell off potentially some of her debts. She may want to kind of see approximately what Stephen or Travis or myself thinks the property's worth. So when she puts it out there for Miss Linda to buy, she can say, we just did this price opinion, and Miss Linda, these loans that we have is actually worth this amount of money. Do you see what I'm saying?
Okay. So in this, and the common practice is the CMA, not the BPO.
Correct. A BPO is for when you're ending up, it is basically a bank is hiring you and they want an opinion of what the broker thinks that value is for that property. A CMA is what we do when we're going out to listing appointments. It's where we're going out to give you an approximate cost of what your property's worth in regards to listing the property.
CMAs are what we actually do for our clients, and BPOs are kind of just things we do on the side to
Make some money.
Yeah.
But Miss Legal, I will say this, they're both the same. So don't let the names throw you. The only difference is they're on different forms, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Okay, so they're the same thing, they're just on different forms, if that makes
Okay.
sense. Okay?
Yes, I understand. Thank you.
You're welcome. So the next one here is after you've prepared that CMA, you want to indicate a price range. And the key point on this is you want to look at the price range when you're doing a CMA. A lot of people focus on the active. New agents focus on the active side. What's the problem with that? What did we just say a minute ago, Travis? If Elizabeth says her house is worth $850,000 and you're showing it's $250,000 and you listed it at $850,000, is that truly going to give, say, Miss Leela, a good range of what her property's worth? No, no. That's why you have to actually go off the sold data, not active, because the key thing is I can go put anybody's property up for $1 million, $2 million. That's going to skew our numbers, but again, it's not going to give a good indication. Okay, so you always want to look at the sold range. Then, of course, you want to do the price it accurately for the shortest time on the market and the best sales price. And guys and gals, this is the hardest one. This one's the hardest one. Is going in and explaining to your client why exactly we're pricing it. So Mr. Eugene, he's got Zillow and he's got Realtor.com and he's got all these other things that are out here. And of course, Mr. Eugene is going through looking at, you know, his house was built, say, in 2000, and he's looking at 2021 houses. And he's like, well, my house looks just as good as that, 500,000. So mine is, even though I paid 100, it's worth 500,000. Okay, and you'll get that. You'll get that. Stephen and Travis can tell you, you'll get that. They'll sit there and they'll print out. Well, see, I got this and this and this. So my house is worth 500,000, and I paid 100 for it last year. Okay, yeah, it just went up immediately, right? Not how this works. Okay, not how it works. What happens is you got to look at it from many different situations. And this is why you got to watch it, kind of going back to like Travis with Elizabeth. If your client has unrealistic expectations, say that Miss Elizabeth thinks her house is worth $850 and he says it's worth $250, and Travis, you go out and you say, okay, you know what, I'm not going to get in an argument with you, Elizabeth. I'm just going to put it on the market for $850. What's the problem, Miss Nobles, with that? What's going to happen to Miss Elizabeth when the first month not one person comes to her house to look at it?
She's gonna find that CP.
She's going to see what Travis was saying was right. That
No, she ain't. Not if she's unrealistic. She got.
I'm gonna get a
Yeah,
thriller.
she's going to, yeah.
She's going to call Travis, and she's going to be like, "What are you doing? You're not doing it right. You're not selling my property. You're not marketing my property. You ain't doing your job."
Yeah, I misunderstood.
I'm in a tunnel.
Yeah. Oh, then she'll be at your office waiting for you. She'll be sitting at the office waiting on you.
And we
I will not show up.
Well,
I will make
we'll go
sure.
fishing.
I
We'll
will
go
make
fishing.
sure you get phone calls from me, texts from me,
My phone don't work
emails,
no more.
Your phone don't work no more.
I know where you live.
She'll have Miss Elizabeth in the car driving over to your house, Travis, waiting for you.
Yes,
But-
yeah, don't move.
But the key thing is in this situation is that, you know, it's great when your client, see, this is the problem. It's great when your client actually listens to you. Is that not right, Miss Leila? Even in counseling, it's wonderful when a client actually listens to you.
It's always great.
Because you're the expert. You went to school for it. You passed a licensing exam. You are the expert. And when a client truly listens to the expert, okay, we can get your house sold very quickly and at the best price. But if we have Miss Linda in this hypothetical, Mr. Eugene, you go out to her house and you tell her, I looked at the numbers, it looks like your house is 170, but if you really want to sell it, I would put it on the market for like 172, 173. Of course, they're going to come down a little bit, but that still puts you right there at 170, and let's sell your property. And Miss Linda says, no, Mr. Eugene, I want to sell my house for $350,000. What's the problem? The problem in this is what?
She's not listening.
The house is not going to sell. You're going to get calls from Travis and Elizabeth and Stephen and myself going, are you an idiot? Crazy? You crazy? There's one that Stephen had got, and they asked him, they said, are you serious? You put one too many zeros, right? That happens. Okay? And what happens to your credibility in the industry?
Goes down.
It drops tremendously. It drops. Okay? So in this situation am I saying that you get in an argument with your client? No. Because we established Miss Elizabeth's going to do what to you, Mr. Travis? You get an argument. You're going to have a hand across the face. Okay? So in that situation is no. But what you need to do is you need to think outside the box. And what I mean by that is you need to say to Miss Elizabeth or Miss Linda, you need to say, I will be more than glad to list the property at what you would like. However, can I ask a favor of you? And they're going to say, of course. Most of the time, they're going to say, of course. If I list it at that price, would you agree with me that if no one comes to your house to look at your house, within 2 weeks, we'll drop your price by $50,000? And then we will reassess after that 2 weeks for another $50,000 until we can start having people come to your property. Now, am I being rude to either of you ladies by saying that? No. What am I saying? I'm willing to do what you want. I'm willing to. But I want a favor out of this too, because the fact is what? I don't want to look like a fool, but I'm not going to tell you that. I'm not going to tell you that you're crazy. You never tell a woman that, or you are going to have a hand across your face.
I have been with an agent before that was complaining about, well, I know this price is a little outrageous, so what do you think it's worth? And the agent responded and said, I can't answer that. The only way is you're going to have to get it appraised or whatever and see for yourself what the property is worth. I can't do that. And I thought that was a very professional way as far as coming back to the client in a way.
Technically, in that situation, that's not a very good situation, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
It is our duty, as it shows on that first bullet, that we have to give them a comparative market analysis.
Well, they did.
Which is our opinion.
And they did.
But what should be said in that situation is, if they ask, well, is this a firm number? The response should be, this is only an opinion of the value. This is what everything around the area is going.
Okay.
While this is my opinion, my recommendation is that if you would like to find out most likely what it will sell for, then yeah, you might want to bring in an appraisal.
So she should have went that way. Okay.
Okay. But again, an agent is not ever supposed to say that they can't give an appraisal or a opinion of value, because we can. That's our job. But if they ask, are you 100% certain, Travis, that property is going to sell for $150,000? What's my key thing there? 100% certain. What does that basically mean, Elizabeth? There you go. It's a guarantee. And can we guarantee anything?
I can't guarantee nothing.
And I get clients that do that to me all the time. They'll talk to say, I'm just hypothetical. Eugene will talk to Travis. And then he'll call me and say, well, your agent, Travis, told me that the property, he came up with 150 for my house. Are you guaranteed, or is he guaranteeing me? Or they'll say this, it's even better. I'll put it even better. Mr. Eugene will call me and say, well, your agent just called me and told me, yeah, Travis, I talked to him and he just guaranteed that my house would sell for 150. And my first comment to him was what? Travis didn't do that. Travis didn't do that because Travis knows you don't guarantee nothing. Period. But what are they wanting me to do, Travis? What are they trying to do? They're trying to corner me to say what? Uh-huh.
It sounds good.
No, I'm not going to say that. What? No, because it's an opinion. It's an opinion. Okay? So in that particular situation, you have to understand that you have to be certain. If you want to be a top producing agent, sometimes you got to let go of the people that are not realistic and focus on the what? Realistic. Focus on the realistic ones. See, because Miss Leela, in your field of work, and you probably know this yourself, in counseling, if you have that one client that just won't listen to you, but they don't want to go anywhere else, they normally, those people are the ones that eat up 90% of your time, don't they?
Yes.
Yep. So 90% of your time is wasted on that one person. Well, if you get rid of that person, guess what happens? Your productivity goes through the roof and you can help more people, which what does that do? More money. Okay? Same situation is. Sometimes, and I tell my agents this a lot, and Stephanie, you probably heard this from me many times, is that sometimes you may not want that $1 million listing because the fact of the matter is those $1 million listings can cost you what? A lot of time and a lot of headaches. So there's a lot of time and a lot of headaches. What ends up happening to him? Well, he's focusing all his time and effort and everything on what? Just that one client, which by he does a split and everything else, he may only make $20,000 per se. Okay? Well, if you come over here and you help, say, 15 or 20 $100,000 listings, you may make a ton more money over here. Well, how did Walmart become so wealthy? They ended up focusing more on the lower class individuals than the what? The higher class. Because the fact of the matter is that more money means more quantity. The more people you help, the more potential earnings you make. Just because a house may be $1 million, I've been there before. I've done $1.5 million sale. I couldn't do anything else but that one client because they wanted every single second of my attention. Okay? And of course, is it owed to that client? Yeah. Mr. Eugene, if you're selling your $1.5 million property and Travis is getting $45,000, do you think that Travis should be at your beck and call? Yeah, because $45,000 is some people's salary.
That's right. That's right.
So for Mr. Travis, that means every little second, every call, everything he needs to be answering. Okay? Because the fact of the matter is that's what you're going into. But when you do that, what now happens? Can Travis take any more clients? No, he's stuck to Mr. Eugene. Okay? That's why if you had, say, $20,000, $100,000 listings, well, what can you tell all of those people? Well, you're just one of my people of many, so I'm having a lot, so I've got to deal with a lot, which means do you have to be at Miss Linda's beck and call? No. Okay. Now, next thing is you have to disclose if the USBAB guidelines were not followed. If you're not going to follow the USBAB guidelines, you have to state those as well. And then after you've done that, the seller, you see here, the seller determines the list price. That's where I came back earlier where I was asking Mr. Eugene and Mr. Travis, is if you give your client a range and they say you're both wrong, I want to list it for X, and it's way higher than what your range is, well, who ultimately makes the decision on the price? The seller. Because whose house is it? The seller. It ain't Travis's. It's not Justin's. It's not Mr. Eugene's. It's the seller. But ultimately, Travis, what's this last line say, though?
They can decide whether to list it or not.
Yeah. So if Miss Elizabeth tells you, I'm going to sell my house for $850,000, and you see it's only worth $150,000, do you want to waste your time with that? No. Okay. So very key in that situation. We also talked about broker price opinion, so I'm going to kind of go through this very quickly because it's very similar, if not the same, as a CMA. But the only difference is that it is a little more than a CMA, but it's less than a appraisal. Okay, and the reason being is it's going to contain the neighborhood analytics, basically, the estimate of any repairs to the property, the current and sold listings, as well as the probable selling price if sold as is or as repaired. So we dig a little bit more deeper, but not a lot deeper. We also, they're used often in regards to foreclosures, if there's a deed in lieu, a short sale, or a mortgage modification. And oftentimes, individuals that will use them will be lending companies, attorneys, or loss mitigation. Okay. Again, there are federal regulations and state regulations. Again, there was the FIRREA 1989 regulations, which started the establishment in regards to how we handle appraisals. Then there was the Texas Licensing Commission in regards to the appraisals within the state of Texas. That was in 1991. Under TALCB, they basically license, certify, and regulate appraisers, as well as safeguard the public interest. The appraisals can be conducted only by persons that are licensed or certified by the TALCB. They're registered as a temporary out-of-state appraiser, or they're approved as an appraiser trainee. Okay. Again, there are 4 different classifications in regards to the TALCB appraisers. There is what's called the general or certified general real estate appraiser, and they can appraise all types of real estate. There's the certified residential real estate appraiser. They can appraise all 1 to 4 unit residential properties, but they must associate with a certified general appraiser to appraise any non-residential properties, which are commercial. There's also the state licensed real estate appraiser. They basically can appraise 1 to 4 unit residential properties under 1 million in a non-complex, or 250,000 in a complex. Again, they must associate with a certified general appraiser if they're going to appraise non-residential properties as well. And then the last one, of course, is the approved appraiser trainee. They have to appraise under the active, personal, diligent direction and supervision of a sponsoring certified appraiser who must sign off on any of their reports. Again, real estate agents may only, as an agent, you can only provide a written analysis, opinion, or conclusion. Okay, and these are basically relating to the estimated price of real property. If the analysis, opinion, or conclusion is not referred to as an appraisal, and it is given in the ordinary course of the business and is related to the actual or potential acquisition, disposition, encumbrance, or management of an interest in real property. Under the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act of 2010, appraiser independence requirements are prohibited. Okay, lenders and brokers from bribing, coercing, extorting appraisers to inflate property values. So in this situation is us as lenders and brokers cannot contact the appraiser to try to get the appraiser to push up value. Okay, we cannot do that. The mortgage brokers and real estate agents also cannot select the appraisers, because the fact of the matter is if I'm going to get to select, what I'm going to do, I'm going to get the ones that are going to do what? Give me what I want. Okay. The mortgage production staff cannot order an appraisal, and the appraisal management companies, which is the AMCs, are separate from the appraising and the lending. They're completely separate in that situation. The AMCs basically recruit and qualify appraisers. They verify the licensing. They further receive appraisal orders from the lenders, and then they contract with the appraisers. They further provide the completed appraisers to the lender. They collect the fees from lenders for the appraisals, and they reimburse the appraisals for the services that they perform, as well as reviewing the appraisals to resolve any disputes. Okay. All right. So that basically ends our lecture for this evening. Go ahead and stop our recording, please.